Great. Okay. Well, I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of State and Community Corrections to order and welcome you all to our first Zoom meeting. And as I welcome you, I'd like to ask for your patience, and I am very hopeful that we're going to be highly successful during this meeting, but it is our first endeavor. And we know now that we have all the board members on, and our grave concern now is that we have all the public members on. So as we start down this road, I'm going to call on Adam Lewin, who is been pivotal along with Sean and our IT staff in crafting how we do this meeting. And Adam's going to give instructions to everybody, board members and members of the public, as we go forward. And I would remind everybody to place themselves on mute when they're not speaking. Adam?
Adam, you're muted.
All right, let's get this going. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be giving you instructions on our meeting today. We are logging into Zoom. Please be sure your microphones are muted. This is very important as we are all on the same call. I will pause now and make sure all board members and participants are muted.
Adam, this is Katie. I'm going to ask a quick question. Sean, are you going to be recording the meeting through Zoom, or are we doing that a different way? Has that begun?
Yes, it has begun.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Still hearing some sound. Can we have everyone muted, please? All right, that's great. Thank you everyone for muting your devices and phones. You will notice that Zoom participation is by audio for all participants and also by video for board members and staff who are presenting today. First, I will give instructions to the board members and then to the public participants. Board members, when you are not speaking, please remember again to mute your microphones. If you wish to make a comment on any of the agenda items, please physically raise your hand on your Zoom video so that we can see you. Board members and staff, if you have dropped the call, please log in again with your meeting ID and password. Please feel free to text me at 916-917-2147 if you have any issues during this meeting. Today's voting will be by roll call only. At the end of each agenda item that needs the board's vote, I will call the roll of all the members in attendance. Recusals. Board members, if you have to recuse yourself from any of the agenda items, please let us know now, as our IT staff will need to mute your microphone and turn off your video during the discussion of that agenda item. You will have to unmute your microphone and turn your camera back on when we have finished discussing that item. You do not need to hang up the call or leave the meeting. Now I'm going to ask all of the board members, do you need to recuse from any of the agenda items? Please state your name and let us know which agenda items you want to recuse.
And this is Aaron, and I just want to point out we did have some recusals previously, including on some of the items for that are actually on the consent calendar. For those, because we are discussing the request for proposals, I would recommend that we have Sheriff Groudon, Board Member Kumpion, Judge Baranko, Mr. Budnick, and Chief Mills be recused from those items when we get to the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Okay, so let's see. Now I will give instructions to the public. Public members, you are joining by Zoom as well. So if you click on the link on our agenda and the BSCC's homepage, you'll be given access to the meeting. When logging in, again, please be sure your microphone is muted. We will give the members of the public time for public comment after each agenda item. We will take public comment following the COVID-19 information items as well as action items. Participants who wish to make public comments can let us know in one of the following ways. You can send an email to Tracy Cone at tracy.cone, C-O-N-E, at bscc.ca.gov. This information is available on our homepage if you did not get that. Please give your name and item number you want to comment on. You can also use the chat feature in the Zoom application, indicating that you would like to make a public comment. Please let us know which agenda item you'd like to comment on. After the comments are received from those who have emailed Tracy or requested it in Zoom, Chair Penner will again ask if anyone on the line has a public comment. She will ask for your name, and then we will add those names to the list and call out your name one at a time for public comment. Members of the public, please only unmute your device or phone during the public comment. We are hoping for the best with this new technology. We remind you that participants will need to unmute or turn on your phone or microphone by dialing *6. If you are using your device, please just press the unmute button when it's time for public comment. We're doing everything we can to support the participation in this call. If necessary, our IT staff will mute callers that do not mute their devices so that it is not disruptive for others. If you are calling by phone, please do not use both your computer device and your phone, as it will echo in the background and will be difficult for us to understand. You may use the following commands on your phone if you're calling by phone. To mute and unmute, dial *6. To raise your hand, dial *9. For the public, if you lose connection, please use the instructions on the BSCC's homepage to relog into the same meeting using this meeting ID and password. If you have any questions, please email me at adam.lewin, that's L-W-I-N, at bscc.ca.gov. My email is also available on the BSCC's homepage. And of course, you could use the Zoom chat feature. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you, Adam. We're going to take roll call of the board now. Rather than asking people to unmute, can they signify, other than Judge Branco, with a hand raised that they're present? Or do you want it auditory?
That is fine with me.
Is that all right, counsel?
I think we should actually do the audio because we're going to have to do audio for the roll calls for the votes anyway.
Okay, all right. Test run, here we go.
Chair Penner.
Present?
Mr. Diaz.
Present.
Mr. Green.
Present.
Mr. Groudon.
Here.
Mr. Gore.
Present.
Mr. Seal.
Present.
Mr. Urtola.
Present.
Mr. Barranco. Mr. Barranco, press *6 to unmute yourself. Okay. Mr. Mills.
I am present.
Mr. Budnick.
Here.
Mr. Steinhardt.
Here.
And Ms. Kumpion.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you all, and thank you all for being with us today, and members of the public who also are in attendance. I'd just like to begin by doing a bit of an opening statement. We're going to move at our first information item into a COVID-19 update. And sorry? Oh, I thought I heard somebody. As we do that, I'd just like to say to every one of you, it's an unprecedented time. I don't need to tell any of you about that. I can tell you that the BSCC has been moving quickly to fulfill our responsibilities and to provide guidance out into the field about the number of issues that we face as a result of this crisis. We have interfaced with many, many stakeholders in the past 2 or 3 weeks, and the leadership of our agency has, I think, been responsive and very quick as we are challenged by a time none of us have ever seen before. And many of you on the board, I'm preaching to the choir, but I need to say out loud to everyone on the BSCC staff how grateful I am for your nimbleness and your quick response. I share that same sentiment with each member of the board, and also to the advocacy community, and certainly the governor's office has been helpful in the amazing leadership we've gotten from them. As we move into the report out portion of this, we're going to give you updates on facility operations, the emergency suspensions of regulations, the new data collection efforts that we're launching, and the challenges that we will have with both training and inspection of facilities. And we're going to talk about the emergency federal funding that will be available for individuals to apply for. I'm going to, Katie, I think I should go first and then you follow up with yours. Is that preferable to you?
Perfect. Yep, please go ahead.
Mainly because I can go first. That's what I'm going to do. Let's see. My next notes here. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading and give you some dates, because I think you as board members need real-time information as to what's going on and what challenges we have ahead as a board. Since the outbreak of COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place orders, the board work has radically changed. The CPGP grantees are not able to deliver services as they intended to do. The CFC construction projects have all been delayed. The STC training has also been delayed, and the FSO jail compliance inspections have been put on hold. And eventually we'll turn to Katie and she'll talk to you about the details of those 3 things I just highlighted for you. I've had a lot of conversations and we have received letters which I have circulated to the board members, and we've had numerous discussions with probation chiefs, sheriffs, and advocates about the concerns about what's going on in our jails and juvenile halls. There are questions about what's being done and what the board can do or should be doing to address the potential COVID outbreaks in local facilities. On March 6th, we sent a memo to the field reminding local facilities of their option to suspend regulations in the event of an emergency, and that any lengthy suspensions would require a continued approval by the board chair. On March 12th, based on consultation with the governor's office and the Department of Public Health, we sent a memo to the field recommending the suspensions of all in-person visitation in jails. On March 13th, we sent further guidance to juvenile halls regarding suspensions of regulations and suggesting alternative methods of visitation in halls. On March 27th, we reviewed all of the requests for suspensions of regulations, and we approved them ongoing until the next 15-day period. On April 3rd, we advised detention facilities on the regulations regarding communicable diseases and provided guidance to work with local health departments. We provided links to resources such as the CDC and the California Department of Health, and we also notified counties that there was an expectation that counties would continue to mitigate suspensions of regulations, i.e. using video visitation in lieu of in-person visitation. We provided alternatives for programming and education to the juvenile facilities. Just yesterday, we sent out a supplemental report for jails and juvenile halls. Normally, we update facility populations on a quarterly basis. Now we are asking for counties to report their total bookings and releases due to COVID crisis on a weekly basis. We will be reviewing emergency suspensions of regulations every 2 weeks. Our field representatives are in constant contact with counties and assisting with mitigation strategies. But we are not done. We know before this crisis took hold, we were in the process of updating our adult facility regulations. We're going to continue that process to the extent we need to revise the regulations addressing communicable diseases, and we will continue to do that. There's going to be a long, ongoing process we are going to continue to work through with our county partners and the governor's office and the CDC and the Department of Public Health. We hope we are covering all of the bases at the time. We are navigating this crisis as fast as we can, and I would invite board members to weigh in on any of the comments I've made thus far before we turn to Katie. Looking for hands, anybody? Okay, I'm gonna turn now over to Katie for her report out as the executive director. Katie?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and members of the public. Very pleased that we are able to bring the board together to talk about these critically important issues that Linda has begun to outline, and I'd like to take you through just a bit more of the detail about what the BSCC responses have been. I would also note, I'm going to mention later, and Linda touched on it, as one example of the many things that are happening in real time, lots of updates day by day and week by week. There is federal funding available, the coronavirus emergency supplemental funding. I'm going to highlight that a little bit, but I'd like to just alert board members and the public that we anticipate the board's going to need to meet again fairly soon, possibly the end of April or early May. And Adam, of course, will help to coordinate on dates, but the work of the board has changed dramatically, and it is our responsibility and our mission to do everything that we can to keep people safe during this unprecedented emergency. So I wanted to give a little bit more detail, as Linda requested that I do, about some of the individual division updates, and many of the, well, actually all of the information that Linda highlighted either is or soon will be on our BSCC website. We have COVID-19 updates by division, and you can click through and see updates about facilities, about grants, about training issues, and about construction on that website. As Linda noted, I'm going to start here with some CPGP updates. Many of our grantees aren't able to deliver their services as they had intended. So the advice that Ricardo and his team have given out is that we are interested in hearing requests for budget modifications so that programs and services can be offered in alternative ways. Ricardo's going to make a presentation today about some authority being delegated to our chair during the COVID-19 emergency to facilitate quicker budget modification changes. So things like providing services through remote means, whether video conferencing or telephone or what have you. And we'll evaluate those and, of course, keep the board posted as those changes may come through. In addition, one of our grants is the Adult Reentry Grant, and we funded, this board approved 69 ARG grant recipients, both in a warm handoff and a rental assistance category last year. And with all of the issues related to COVID-19, and particularly highlighting the additional approximately 3,500 releases from state prison pursuant to Secretary Diaz's order, the need for reentry services is ever more urgent right now. So our team put together a survey of all the adult reentry grant recipients so that we can get information about their current capacity to provide reentry services. So things like housing, transportation, food, clothing, etc. And we asked for a very short turnaround on that survey, and we'll provide that information. One other thing coming just under this CPGP division heading is that we, the BSCC, are responsible for collecting annual reports on JJCPA and YOBG plans. And because of the governor's executive order of about a week or so ago, we now have a 30-day extension on that timeline. Turning to STC program updates, we're well aware that training can't be completed for a variety of reasons, travel restrictions and cancellation of programs. So we've alerted the field that we will consider COVID-19 as a mitigating circumstance so that agencies won't be found out of compliance and that they can have additional time to complete those. Again, the theme here is that we're trying to ensure as much work as possible is getting done, but showing flexibility where we can. We know that many agencies have been unable to administer an in-person selection exam, so we have an online selection exam option so that agencies can continue to recruit and hire as they may need to right now. We also have extended a deadline for agencies to file their annual training plan, so that annual training plan is now due May 15th and modifications are due by May 30th. Linda highlighted a bunch of the emergency response issues we've done under the FSO, our inspections division. I just would want to highlight, as Linda mentioned, that our regular inspection cycle is on hold owing to travel limitations and all of that. We've canceled the scheduled inspections through the end of May, but wanted to let the board and the public know that our field representatives are still conducting extensive work from home on desk reviews, so they're looking at written policies and procedures for compliance. The bulk, however, of our field, our FSO field reps has been with daily contact out to the facilities on their operations, their need for technical assistance, and the suspensions of regulations, as Chair Penner has already highlighted. Let's see. I want to give, I just have so much appreciation for all of the staff, but I also really want to say thank you to our research division, who has ramped up new technology through Smartsheet software to collect information that's very important right now during this emergency. Linda touched on a new supplement to the jail profile survey and juvenile detention profile survey, which we announced yesterday, and that Casey Wormuth, our research chief, and her team will be training and giving information to the local data providers out at the county level. Sorry, my phone's ringing. That's a little distracting. And so those things are happening as well. We anticipate also sending a request for information out to all the probation chiefs to ask them to provide information about their current policies, although that may be a little bit too strong of a word, but their procedures and practices right now during the COVID-19 crisis around admissions and releases. There's tremendous interest in what has been going on, and I think the locals have information to share that can be valuable. So we're not quite ready with that information request, but that should be coming soon. Let's see, before I open it up for questions, I would also like to just describe a little bit more about this coronavirus emergency supplemental funding, CESF. It's all, you know, new alphabet soup here. This funding is available from the federal government, part of the $2.1 trillion in coronavirus relief. As the state administering agency for California on the Burn JAG grant, we are also going to be responsible for administering the funding, which is $58.5 million coming to the BSCC to be administered out. Now, the top line summary is that the CESF program will provide funding to assist eligible states, local units of government, and tribes in preventing, preparing for, and responding to the coronavirus. So that's a really huge, you know, as long as there's a nexus to basically the criminal justice system, we have flexibility to allocate that funding out. I'd like to note that very intentionally, this funding pot was put together in a way that does not include the provisions that have been in recent years of JAG grants over which there's been litigation related to immigration. So that is not going to be an issue that would hold this up. So the funds can be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the virus, as I mentioned. The allowable projects and purchases include, but are not limited to, overtime, equipment, including PPE, hiring, supplies, including gloves, masks, and sanitizer, training, travel expenses, and addressing the medical needs of inmates in state, local, and tribal prisons, jails, and detention centers. That I'm reading from the actual solicitation itself. This application is open until May 29th, and it would be an understatement to say there is significant interest in this funding. We're well aware of that, and it's the responsibility of this board in consultation with the administration to determine how that should be allocated out. We've had some very preliminary discussions with the Department of Finance, and we're hearing from local law enforcement agencies, the Judicial Council. We're well aware that CSSA and CPOC are tracking this as well. I had an inquiry from the California Office of Emergency Services. So the needs are just tremendous. And we have some flexibility in how that application can be submitted. We don't have to have every detail worked out, but I know there's going to be great interest from this board in how those decisions roll out. So that concludes my update, COVID-19 related, and we're happy to take any questions from the board first and then turning to the public after that. Linda, you're muted.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as Adam stated, if you wish to make a public comment at this juncture, I hope you've touched bases with Tracy. But before we go to the public, I'd ask any members of the board who'd like to make a comment at this point to please weigh in. David? I heard. Yeah. You have to take yourself
I
off.
didn't even raise my hand, but you knew.
But I see, I have a good view of all your faces now. So if you sneer at me, I can see that. So.
Okay, I'll just make a brief comment. I had a lot of interaction with the staff, with Linda, Katie, and others on the juvenile justice side, on the guidances that came out on juvenile facilities, including one very kind of active conversation that involved the governor's staff looking at what BSCC could do. And I was very pleased with the second and stronger guidance that came out that actually included some of the advocates' language on best practices and so on. There are so many demands on BSCC now to solve every problem related to COVID. And I just want to say from my own inside view and my experience that I think the staff is working at maximum capacity and that BSCC is doing what it can do within its authority. I think we're going to hear from people who want us to do more, but there are limits as to what BSCC can do. We can't mandate releases all across the state and so on. So just to credit the staff for the work done and to try to reassure those who want so much more to be done that BSCC is working hard on all of this.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate that. And looking to any other members of the board. Okay, Tracy, I did see you. Raise your hand.
Tracy, you're muted.
I'm just trying to get clarification. I'm in a discussion right now with Renee Menard, who wants to talk at the during the information item, and I've got, but I. 3 people that want to talk about COVID, and I don't know when she wants to speak. So if she could just let us know right now if she wants to speak now or during.
Yeah, you know, as always, and I don't know exactly how to proceed with this because we can't look out into the audience. At the end of the meeting, should you not find an agenda item that your comments fit under, please know that you will have ample time then because we discussed a lot of the adjustments and the accommodations and new practices that we've rolled out as a result of COVID-19. We thought it was prudent to have the public comment as it was fresh in their mind, but there'll be ample time at the end of the meeting should that need to be.
Chair Penner, Dominique Nong would like to comment on COVID-19. I'm
Okay.
going to unmute her. If I let me find her.
And we're gonna continue with you know, a limited comment period on this, and I think we'll go with 2 minutes generally is how we do that. So I'd appreciate everybody trying to adhere to that.
Good morning. Am I audible?
We can hear you.
Oh,
How are
excellent.
you, Dominique?
Doing well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to just take a moment to express my appreciation to the board and the staff about the way that they have been responding to this response and specifically to the advocates' concerns. I just have 3 additional requests for consideration based on what the staff is already doing. So one, with regards to the efforts that the BCC is already making to make public whatever suspensions have been implemented by the facilities, I know there's interest by the public to actually see posted the specific notifications in writing that the facilities are submitting to the BACC and that the chair and staff are considering. So instead of summaries, actually seeing the actual notifications from the facilities. Number two, with regards to the guidelines that have been submitted to different county probation departments about developing a plan for safe re-entry of people being released from facilities, I would just request, and again, this is coming from folks who have loved ones inside, that perhaps when technical assistance is provided, that there be some guidance that perhaps testing of the individuals for COVID-19 before they released happen, because there are some concerns that without knowing if they are infected or not, whether it's safe to immediately release them back home or whether they need to be quarantined, whether as part of the house or somewhere else. And number three, with regards to the posting of the weekly APD data on populations, which is very exciting, I would just ask, and again, this is based on information I've heard in statewide conversations with advocates, that I would ask that there be distinctions clearly made about which releases are being made directly in response to COVID-19 and which are releases that would have happened anyways because of where the case is with the youth. Because I know that right now there are youth who would have been released anyways or are released on motions or actions that are unrelated to COVID-19. So I'm just asking that there be a distinction on which releases are specifically in direct response to COVID-19. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate your remarks. Tracy?
We had several people that want to speak on the same topic that Dominique's speaking on, and I was going to wait, but they're all asking if they can speak now. So can I give you the list and you could call on people and we'll have that discussion now? Or the public comment?
I'd appreciate you just calling the names, Tracy. That would work.
Okay, let's start with Sue Burrell of the Pacific Juvenile Defender Center.
And can we remember the 3-minute limit, please? Sue, are you out there?
I am out here indeed.
I saw you earlier. How are you?
Hello, doing well. I hope you are too. I think I know many of you. My name is Sue Burrell, and I'm the Policy Director for the Pacific Juvenile Defender Center. And over the last few weeks, I have been talking quite often with Katie and with Linda and with David Steinhardt about juvenile facility coronavirus issues. I'm happy about the transparency in the data collection. I'm looking forward to David's survey on what's happening. I'm happy that the guidance is out there. There are 2 points I would like to talk to at this moment. First, I think that you need to strengthen the guidance to facilities on release. Buried on your website is a March 13th statement that says it's recommended that juvenile detention facilities consider other alternative placements. I think that is not strong enough. If we were on a sinking ship, you wouldn't simply recommend getting the lifeboats. You would say, get the lifeboats and get the people off the ship. All the experts say that the only chance we have of containing coronavirus in institutions is to have as few people in there as possible. And even though many of our juvenile facilities are under capacity, many are also understaffed and becoming more so as staff test positive or don't want to come to work. You are the state regulatory agency, and you need to say right now that probation must exercise its discretion to release or immediately go to court and ask for release with underlying health conditions, youth in on low-level violations or crimes, and youth who are unable to receive the rehabilitative services which are the premise for their incarceration. You have the authority to do this as the regulatory agency, but if you think you do not, you should immediately seek approval from the governor. We can still get ahead of this in many parts of the state. Second point, the SCC should immediately, and we've talked about this already, but for the board, I think you should immediately post a notice on your website saying that you are a clearinghouse for COVID-19 problems. You need to take emails and calls from incarcerated people, from family members, staff, and others who have sanitation or social distancing problems, medical treatment issues, or other virus-related matters. People out there are afraid, and rightfully so, and this agency needs to affirmatively step up and connect people with the right place to get relief or assure that relief is provided. The guidance on release and access to support should be the very first thing people see on your website. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the efforts that you've made thus far.
Thank you, Sue. Tracy?
Shannon Wilbur of the National Center for Lesbian Rights.
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Shannon Wilbur. I'm the Youth Policy Director at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. And I really thank you so much, Sue, for your comments. I really want to echo some of what you have just said. And also, I'd really like to start by appreciating the BSCC and specifically Linda Penner and Katie Howard for making yourselves available to hear our concerns and working with us during this really unprecedented crisis to protect the health and safety of young people in county facilities. I think the guidance that was released by the BSCC addresses many of our immediate concerns, specifically related to conditions and operations in juvenile facilities with respect to young people who are still in custody. I think this pandemic has made clear the need for some operational and structural changes to meet not just this immediate crisis, but also to prepare for the next inevitable emergency caused by the next virus or emergencies, for example, that are climate related, that are also increasing. These that would also jeopardize the health and safety of young people in custody. I want to echo Sue's two suggestions, and I'll just make a couple of additional points. It's clear that there's a need in every county to establish, again, both for this crisis and for the next crisis, an expedited process for evaluating every single youth in custody to determine whether they can be safely released. I don't think I need to elaborate on the reasons that reducing population is literally the most critical strategy for protecting the health and safety of youth. These reasons have been very well documented nationally by virtually every standard and statement that's been released. But I do want to make the point that reducing population is important even in facilities that are not crowded or are operating below capacity, so that this shouldn't be related simply to whether the current population is at capacity. Some counties have created the process, but others have been unable to agree on the process or the criteria for release. And in some counties, courts have continued to detain young people, arguably, who shouldn't be detained under any circumstances. The data that BSCC is, that Katie talked about, that the BSCC will be requesting from counties, is going to give us really important information about the status in the field. But I want to echo that BSCC's role in creating or requiring this process at the county level is critical in ensuring that it actually is implemented on the ground. And again, my second point is Sue's second point, which is the need for some kind of centralized hotline that is most appropriately housed at BSCC as the state oversight agency for youth, families, staff, advocates to get information and also to register not just complaints, but concerns from on the ground. The agency, I think, is ideally situated as the state oversight agency to triage these calls and appropriately to field reps or county probation staff or whomever can respond appropriately to these concerns. And the hotline or this mechanism would also provide really critical information from the counties to BSCC as well as giving people on the ground a means of addressing their very reasonable fears and concerns. So once again, I want to thank you so much. I know, Linda and Katie, you are working more than overtime, and I just really appreciate your responsiveness and the opportunity to make this comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And we appreciate the conversations we've had with you. I think we've moved the ball quite a ways, and we'll continue talking. Anybody else there, Tracy?
We're getting more as we speak. Miguel Garcia, Policy Coordinator of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. You're up.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Hopefully everyone.
Miguel.
Hi, hopefully everyone's doing right and their loved ones are safe. My name is Miguel Garcia and I am the Policy Coordinator of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I want to share a personal experience when I was discharged from the Department of Juvenile Justice and sent to Riverside County Jail. While in Riverside County Jail, I remember the intake unit I was placed in being overcrowded and multiple individuals crammed inside a small cell waiting to be placed in a living unit. This process would take hours, with new individuals being added to the intake unit faster than those already inside could be placed elsewhere. Once I was placed in my living unit cell, I found that my toilet was broken and the shared bathing facility that we would use would overflow with water from previous showers and had to be scooped out using a cup. With the impact of COVID-19 combined with the conditions that I mentioned inside Riverside County Jail, the safety and well-being of those inside is at risk, especially now that it has been reported that 8 individuals and 23 employees have tested positive for COVID-19, resulting in 2 deaths. The Riverside Sheriff's Association confirmed that one of the employees who passed away worked assignments at the Larry Smith Correctional Facility, Paris Station, Court Services, Southwest Station, and Coyce Bride Detention Center, but it's not clear where the employee was last assigned. The Riverside Sheriff's Department has over 37 incarcerated individuals and 5 detention facilities. The Riverside Sheriff's Department has not disclosed the location of positive COVID-19. I urge the BSCC insist on transparency in regard to the locations of individuals infected, as public health experts can assist in improving the current protocols that have already failed to protect against the spread of this virus in local detention facilities. Families should not have to worry and fear wondering if the virus is spreading inside the facilities that their loved one may be in. For this reason, the BSCC should serve as a public database to track COVID-19 in county jail, county juvenile justice facilities. There's currently no statewide resource that centralizes county COVID-19 facility data, which is critical to understand the scope of the pandemic. The BSCC is already responsible for collecting and analyzing local trends, including county facility population, and has the infrastructure to collect COVID-19 data. Thank you, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Renee Menard. Renee.
Hi, yep, this is Renee.
Okay.
Thank you so much for making this meeting accessible to everyone today, and I hope everyone's doing well from their own homes. I'm Renee Menard with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, and I first want to thank the board for the recent steps you've taken to address advocates' concerns and to increase the guidance that is being provided to counties during these challenging times. As the board is aware, advocates provided recommended actions to the BSCC on March 19th to support the agency's leadership in response to COVID-19 and its threat in local facilities. So in particular, I want to thank the board for its recent guidelines to counties. However, I second the voices of folks on the call who have said that these do need to be strengthened. And I also appreciate the board's move to review regulation suspensions every 2 weeks. This is a really critical step given how rapidly changing the crisis is, and our hope is that it can ensure that facilities are maintaining all standards that are possible during these times with frequent review of these decisions. And I also would like to raise the challenges that Miguel touched on as well. It can't be stressed enough that the lack of statewide resources for a centralized COVID-19 database on county facilities is really detrimental to a coordinated effort. The lack of centralized information prevents us from being able to respond to county facility needs and the needs of people who are either incarcerated or being released when we don't have access to that information. While we're piecing this together by media reports and press releases from facilities, along with anecdotal stories that we're hearing from our colleagues and our loved ones, we really are lacking the glue that we need to be able to move forward in a proactive way rather than just a reactive one. So I really would urge the BSCC to consider creating a data clearinghouse, as Sue had mentioned, and to look to the state system as a model for that. CDCR has already developed a system that, a public reporting system that does keep track of COVID cases among staff and youth in the facilities. And the BSCC is already collecting and analyzing local trends, including county facility populations. So we really hope that your agency could help support collaborative efforts and greatly impact our strong response to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Israel Villa.
Good morning, muy buenos dias. My name is Israel Villa. I'm the Deputy Director with the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice. Foremost, also wanted to thank and acknowledge this board for their leadership on these issues, for allowing this platform and the opportunity to express our concerns. I also want to echo and reinforce the recommendations that have been made thus far. Besides our children's physical well-being and keeping them safe from the virus, my biggest concern is the harmful effects of family separation and isolation. I know from experience the harsh and adverse impacts isolation has on one's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual development and growth. I understand that current circumstances and this pandemic may compel the suspension of some regulation and standards. In my years of incarceration, the most common response to issues and concerns was always lockdown. Again, as some standards may be suspended, I urge you to encourage juvenile facilities to not institute lockdown and isolation, rather to ensure that our kids receive as much program and recreation as possible, utilize the social distancing and the necessary security precautions. I also urge and ask for further investment in and increased mental health and counseling services. I know that we have been at historic arrest and incarceration rates are at historic lows. I also know that a lot of our juvenile halls are fairly empty. And again, rather than relying on lockdown and isolating our kids, I ask that we provide ample programming, daily free phone calls and video visitations so folks can stay connected to their families. I also really want to reinforce one of Sue's recommendations, and that be that we look at and evaluate, well, what kids are in there and what they're for, and that all kids who are there for misdemeanors, status offenses, nonviolent felonies, they figure out some kind of release plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Israel. Just for the record, we haven't suspended any regulations on room confinement. Just put that out there. Tracy?
This is the last speaker I have on this topic, Rebecca Gonzalez, the National Association of Social Workers.
Thank you. Like she said, this is Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers. I want to thank the board for the work you've done so far, trying to protect people in our facilities. But today, and I also want to echo the comments of the other advocates, because we are also very concerned about people who are in both juvenile and adult facilities. But today I'm going to talk more from the perspective of the workers. So we have social workers who work in many facilities, who work as mental health counselor, discharge planners, case managers, etc. And we have heard of unsafe conditions at some of these facilities, namely the Twin Towers. So I know some of you have seen this letter, but she had complained about the lack of transparency about the number of infections, the lack of personal protective equipment, inadequate cleaning of facilities and lack of hand washing stations. And of course, this puts social workers and inmates and other staff at risk. And then they go home, the workers go home, and there's spread to the general community. So we believe it is a very dangerous situation. We appreciate the guidance you have put out so far, but we do agree with Sue that it needs to be stronger because we've heard that some facilities are not necessarily taking the guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tracy, is that?
Those are all of the people that I have signed up for public comment at this point.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the comments. We're now moved to the legal update. Counsel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a very.
Can we have a board moment on the public comment?
Oh, absolutely. I apologize.
I wonder, this is David, I wonder if other members of the board have responses to some of the suggestions that were made. What occurs to me is that two of the suggestions sound commendable to me, that BSCC would somehow set up a complaint clearinghouse at some level, and two, that it might somehow serve as a clearinghouse on rates of infections and so on. But both of those requests go to capacity issues at BSCC. And I just wonder, I really see BSCC as stretched to the max here. And while these suggestions are desirable and might resonate as things that we should be doing, I wonder if there are things that BSCC could even do given its staffing capacity and the work that it faces now. And I just wonder if board or staff has any response on that point.
Well, I can say that we have seen complaints and we have moved issues that have come to our attention to the appropriate authorities and taken action where we can. In terms of the reporting of being a COVID-19 clearinghouse, I think the State Department of Health and the governor's office has taken the lead on that. And I think we aren't appropriately resourced for that piece of it in particular. I don't know if Katie has a reaction or.
Well, what I will say is that part of the difficulty, and at a time like this, I do not want to sound like a bureaucrat at all. I mean, we are all deeply concerned about what's happening in facilities, and some of the reports that are coming out, particularly in recent days, are very concerning. There's no question about it. So we want to be as helpful as we can be. Linda has already been in contact in recent days with the director of the California Department of Public Health. And I guess this is only by way of explanation. I really do not want it to sound like that's not our job, because that's not how any of us feel. But the delivery of the healthcare services within the county facilities, it has to work in conjunction with that county agency, whether probation or sheriff, on all of these issues. If there are more ways that we can be helpful, we will be. And we've talked about all of this. Allison's team gets a lot of information from the locals, but I think what Rebecca Gonzalez just shared about, individual employees are really worried about some of the presumably preventable risks that are happening by a lack of social distancing and a lack of the supplies for hand washing and all of the rest. So I would just say over the last 4 weeks, this agency has stepped up to the plate in ways I couldn't have imagined and figured out how to do stuff. So we're here to be as helpful as we possibly can, and that continues to evolve.
And I think it's fair to say that we became aware of the social worker association's concerns and moved that to the appropriate place. But agreed, Katie, we don't want to sound like bureaucrats. But we also have to be well aware of the magnitude of this across the state and the various other reporting requirements locals have. And so we've tried to balance that conundrum right now, knowing we've asked for more, the health department is asking for more, everybody's reporting out in many, many different fashions. And I don't want that to be heard from anybody who's spoken earlier as a no, but we are contemplating and considering and consulting on all of the various issues that were raised by members of the public and you, David. So, and I appreciate, David, you saying, you know, our plate is full, but you know, we want to help in any way we can during the crisis. So I think anybody else from the board want to comment on any of that? We're not, I don't think we're there yet, Tracy. Anybody else from the board? Okay. I'm going to now move to
Brian Goldstein was late in getting in the queue and wants to know if he can speak on this topic before you move on.
Okay. I'm going to make the one exception, and Brian, limit that to under 3 minutes, please, and then we need to move on. Are we having technical problems, Tracy?
Go ahead, Brian.
I don't think she's reached him.
He emailed and
Well, that's okay. You know, we still have the end of the meeting. So if we'll move on, and certainly there's a placeholder for him then.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Hi there. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. There's technical difficulties.
Okay. Okay. 3 minutes, Brian, or less.
Okay, great. Good morning, Brian Goldstein with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. First, just want to acknowledge the work of the Board of State and Community Corrections up to this point, and hope everyone at the agency is safe and healthy. Want to thank the board for considering our recommendations up to this point, and just want to reiterate the points that were raised in earlier public comment, which is that right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's much that we don't know about testing and infection in county jails and juvenile facilities across the state. As others have said, there is no statewide resource that centralizes COVID-19 facility data. This is critical information for us. This morning, CJCJ and many other organizations submitted a letter to the governor's office requesting that BSEC should serve as this public database for COVID-19 information in county facilities. And as has been previously mentioned, the agency can model reporting on what CDCR has already done in terms of tracking populations and employee information. The agency already collects local county facility information, and we believe that the capacity exists right now. We are encouraged that the agency is expanding reporting for the jail profile survey and the juvenile detention survey, given COVID-19. In the end, the BSEC needs to recognize that concerns about capacity must be weighed against the fact that there are 75,000 Californians in county facilities right now that we must protect. And we hope the agency will take our request seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Linda, this is Gordon.
Yes?
This is Gordon. Sean and I have been emailing back and forth. I just want to make sure I press the right button. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Aaron, can you press the right button and unmute yourself and give a legal update?
I will do my best. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just very, very briefly, I think we're entering our third or fourth year on some of the burn jag litigation. That litigation has made its way up to some of the circuit courts and other jurisdictions. Two recent opinions came out, one from the First Circuit, one from the Second Circuit, one in our favor and one not in California's favor. The majority of appellate level circuit court decisions have gone the way that California has gone. But now that there's a circuit split, it seems very likely now that the United States Supreme Court will have to resolve the burn jag litigation. and we'll continue to keep you apprised of what's going on there. Just wanted to reiterate something that Katie said earlier about the new $58 million of additional coronavirus funding, which is being put out along the Burn-JAG formula, but the immigration conditions which are subject to that lawsuit are not part of that pot of money. So with that, Madam Chair, I think that's all I have for legal update right now.
Thank you, Aaron. We move now on to the consent items on the board agenda. That is item A through D. Yes.
Just real briefly, we wanted to give a super quick debrief on our listening sessions from earlier in March.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is information item 5, and I'll be very, very brief. It is hard to imagine how much our world has changed since Tuesday, March 10th, which is when we held the first of 2 listening sessions in Sacramento. I want to thank board members Lee Seal and Gordon Baranco for coming to Sacramento, and Chair Penner chaired a listening session in our boardroom in Sacramento on March 10th. We had 7 public comments. We also had 3 other members of the public introduce themselves there. So it was a good turnout, and the comments tended to focus around a couple of different themes. Several people mentioned, and some of the people who were there are also on our call today participating. We appreciate that. One of the themes that really emerged was the idea of, to the extent possible, on the inspections, that the BSCC should not provide advance notice, should go out into the facilities as possible, and surprise to see what's going on. So as we go into, when we are finally back to a little bit more of normal business operations, and we look at our regulation revisions and so on, I think there's a way in which we can talk about some of those follow-up visits possibly being unannounced. There were also in addition, some additional emerging concerns raised by speakers about visitation around coronavirus, as that was really starting to become, obviously a huge issue. There were questions about medical policies and medical treatment inside of jails. And let's see, there was a strong voice for including the voice of formerly incarcerated people in the development of the regulations. So that was a summary of the Sacramento comments. That was from Tuesday, March 10th. On Wednesday, the 11th, Chair Penner and Tracy Cohn and I traveled down to Bakersfield for the second planned listening session. We had one captain from an area police department come who wanted to listen, and there were no public comments offered. We were there in the Board of Supervisors room, and did not have anybody come out for those for that opportunity. So Chair Penner, that's my brief report.
Right, and then I guess since I excluded that report, I'm going to add to it. We were headed to San Diego and canceled that as a result of the crisis, and I believe we were actually considering an LA stop also. We had a placeholder there, and I assume at some point we'll continue on with that discussion, but right now that piece of our operation is on hold. Moving now, where I tried to go earlier, but Katie helped me out, to the consent items. That's item A through D. If anyone would like to pull any agenda items from the consent calendar, please let me know. Hearing none, anybody from the public like to pull a consent item? Nothing, Tracy? Okay, I'd ask for the board members a motion and a second.
Madam Chair, before we do that, we do have a couple of the requests for proposals that are on the consent calendar. Normally we would ask a few board members to leave the room. Obviously we can't do that, but we'd ask just very briefly, and again, this will be because it is on consent, but we do have to do the roll call. For item C, we would have Mr. Baranco, Ms. Kumpion, and Mr. Budnick recuse themselves as they either are involved on boards of nonprofits, and then for item D, Sheriff Groudon, Ms. Kumpion, Mr. Branco, Mr. Budnick, and Chief Mills, if they could, again, mute themselves and turn off their cameras, and then we'll dispense of that consent item straight away.
This is Gordon Barranco. I'll actually leave the room.
Don't go too far from your phone.
Okay, so do you want to handle these items separately? The consent agenda then?
We have enough to maintain our quorum on each item. So I think if we do the recusals in bulk.
Seeing now the recusals appear to be off my screen, I would ask for a second and a motion on the consent items. I mean, a motion and a second. I can't speak now on the consent items.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent items. Mike Rotolo.
Second, Sheriff Gore.
We have a motion and a second. Adam, will you take roll of the vote?
Sheriff Henner,
Aye.
Mr. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
and Mr. Groudon has recused himself. Mr. Gore,
Aye.
Mr. Seal is
Aye.
Mr. Rotolo,
Aye.
and Mr. Branco also recused himself. Mr. Mills,
Recused.
oh, he recused that one. Mr. Budnick,
I think he recused also.
okay. Mr. Steinhardt,
Aye.
and Ms. Kumpion also recused. Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you, Adam. Now moving to item E of our discussion items.
We would ask, go ahead, for our members to come back
Okay,
by
how do we do that?
well, we're asking them to turn their video back on and their
Okay,
sound. Although I would note what we have for as we move to agenda item E, that's a CalVIP issue, and so once again we would ask Mr. Barranco, Mr. Budnick, and Ms. Kumpion to recuse themselves for that item.
okay. Mr. Budnick, are you there? This is the part I'm confused. How do we, I see Chief Mills, but I'm not seeing Scott Budnick.
Scott Budnick is on the call. He is muted and his camera is off.
Yeah, and so he should recuse for agenda item E as we're taking this item up. But if we
Do we have all other board members back on?
yeah, if we could see if we could get Chief Mills back, he has to still turn his video back on once Sean lets him back on.
There's Chief Mills. Chief Mills. Gotcha. See Ralph. And Judge Branco?
And Branco's recused.
Okay.
Ready to go?
We are ready to go. Just for board members, so you know, because I had to learn this the hard way. If you touch on the agenda item, it'll on the agenda, it'll take you directly to the agenda item. I think, and I think Colleen, are you here?
I'm here.
All right, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Colleen, and take it away.
All right, this will be a brief item. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Colleen Curtin here, field representative in the Corrections Planning and Grants Program Division, presenting agenda item E. Agenda item E requests approval of a no-cost one-year extension for 2 of the CalVIP grantees, one city, the City of Pasadena, and one community-based organization, Young Visionaries Youth Leadership Academy. These 2 grantees are in a unique situation because they received funding partly from the 2017 budget and partly from the 2018 budget. The funding for the all 2017 grantees will revert on June 30th, 2020 by operation of law. But this recommendation is to provide an extension for these 2 grants with the portion of their grant funding that came from the 2018 budget. Because these two grantees had split funding, there were delays at the local level in receiving city council approval, and they were delayed in implementing project activities. More recently, the coronavirus crisis has impacted their ability to provide services. A one-year extension will allow these grantees additional time to deliver services and spend down the grant funds, offsetting time lost both at the start of the grant and during this current crisis. The 2018 portion of their funds will not expire until June 30th of 2023, which gives the grantees sufficient time to complete the closeout and liquidation process. In conclusion, staff recommends that the board approve a no-cost, time-only one-year extension for the City of Pasadena and Young Visionaries Youth Leadership Academy. Are there any questions?
That was item E, and I thought we were on C, so I'm a little confused.
Item C was on the consent agenda.
Okay, I'm unconfused. Never mind.
Boy, but it was good, David, because you really confused me when you were confused. I thought, uh-oh.
They're
Any
both
questions?
items.
Yeah, any questions for Colleen? Any members of the public in the queue, Katie, that want to comment on this item?
Tracy's saying no.
Okay. Okay. Moving along, looking for a motion and a second from the board.
Motion to approve. I'll second. Second.
We
Sheriff
have a
Brown.
first and a second. Adam, will you take the roll?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Gore,
Aye.
Mr. Seal,
Aye.
Mr. Urtola,
Aye.
Mr. Barranco recused, Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Budnick also recused, Mr. Steinhardt,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion also recused. Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you, Adam. And we'll invite recused members back on.
This is Gordon. I'm back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was looking for the combination to the bathroom.
I think I saw Norma. Briefly, Norma?
I'm back.
There you go. Scott? Chief Mills is out there. I assume the video's off. Scott's out there, okay? Are we comfortable with everybody being back, Adam?
Yes,
John?
everybody's back.
All right, we'll move forward. On to item F. Ricardo Goodrich, there you are. We see you. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, I am. Okay, good morning, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Ricardo Goodrich with the Corrections Planning and Grants Programs Division. Agenda item F, request temporary staff authority to approve grant project scope changes, modifications of program purpose areas, and no-cost extensions in consultation with the board chair through June 2020. Due to the coronavirus health emergency, a number of grant-funded projects have expressed an interest in modifying their grant agreements to find new ways to serve their clients. Under normal circumstances, major project changes or modifications are presented to the board for approval. Staff does anticipate an increase in the volume of projects, requesting project changes in the next several months, and requests temporary delegated authority to approve project modifications during this period in consultation with the board chair. All COVID-19 related budget modifications will be documented and reported to the board at upcoming meetings. This concludes my presentation and happy to take any questions from the board at this time.
Looking to the board for any remarks. Tracy, anybody in the public wish to make a remark at this time? Looking for a motion and a second, please.
Oh, shoot. Scott's asking when he can come back.
Okay, hold
I
the phone
motion.
here.
It's Ralph.
We got a motion.
Second, Andy.
Second.
Okay. Hang on, let's see if we can get Scott back. Well, actually, he couldn't vote on the item anyway since he wasn't here and we have a quorum. So I'm going to ask Adam to take the roll.
Oh, there's Scott. Hey, Scott.
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Groudon,
Aye.
Mr. Gore,
Aye.
Mr. Seal,
Aye.
Mr. Ortola,
Aye.
Mr. Barranco,
Aye.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Steinhardt,
Aye.
and Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. And moving on now to item G, the jail profile survey. This item is for information only. And I'd invite Casey to queue up.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Casey Wormuth, Chief of Research, and I'm here to present Agenda Item G, providing a status update on the jail profile survey. During the February board meeting, the board authorized the modification of the JPS to collect information about late night releases. We also discussed our near-term JPS system improvements. I am providing an informational update on that work. There are additional details in your board report at tab G, so I'll simply provide highlights and ask if you have questions at this point. We are working on a draft recommendation for the collection of information related to late night releases from county jails. Once the draft recommendation is developed, the BSCC will solicit comments and suggestions from reporting jurisdictions, subject matter experts, and interested stakeholders. Prior to the coronavirus emergency and California's stay-at-home order, the BSCC planned on completing the public comment period by June 1, 2020, and beginning the collection of late night release information in January 2021. We are working out necessary modifications given the current coronavirus-related impacts across the state. However, a shift in the timeline may be necessary. A public comment period will begin as soon as practical following this board meeting and the completion of the draft recommendation. We are also continuing to work on the planned near-term improvements to the jail profile survey. With respect to a more comprehensive review and update to the jail profile survey, at this point, that larger effort is on hold. We still have the goal of developing a future version of the JPS that will collect information reflective of the more current needs and interests of the local jurisdictions and other interested parties who rely on the data. But that effort will be resumed when we have a better picture of the resource needed to complete this work. Status updates will be provided at future board meetings. This concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board on this item? Well, I, for one, Casey, want to thank you for all your work on this and the other many projects we've been able to find for you since we all started working from home. Now looking to the public.
Linda, before we do, this is Andy. Are they going to include any criminal justice crime data, like Part 1 crime data in that report?
In the additions to add late night release information or in a modified comprehensive update to the jail profile survey?
I'm specifically interested in the relationship between late night jail releases and crime in the jurisdictions that house those facilities. Have we looked at that at all?
No, we have not.
Well, and we haven't looked at the sort of the relationship between the late night releases and the crime rate. Anecdotally, we've heard about issues surrounding late night releases and danger to inmates that are released during the middle of the night. But I don't think we had I don't think we were going to do a comparison of those releases and crime rates.
Okay.
I
Chair
think we,
Bernard, looks like we have a question.
I see it.
From Sue Burrell.
I see it. Thank you.
Got that? Okay.
Mute. Yeah, I just have a question about the process from here. I noticed on the draft survey, there's an H4, there's an element, total number of juveniles in custody this month per WIC 707. And I wondered, and you can tell me, I should just ask this in the comment period, but that's just one set of youth that would be in there. There's also the youth who are older than 18 or 19 years old who are transferred, but that weren't 707 cases. And that would be tremendously valuable information for us to have, so we know how many just youth that are sort of aging out of juvenile hall or in jails. So I'm wondering what the process would be to give that kind of input to the survey creators.
Go ahead, Casey.
I think that would be something we would consider when we take on the comprehensive JPS update. And so we'll have more information to the board and the public at that time for input in shaping that.
And when will that be?
So that comprehensive update right now is on hold while we adjust at this period as we respond to COVID-19, and then also how that's going to impact our resources. It was originally planned after we updated the late night release information to then look at that comprehensive update. But right now we're going to have to relook at that and come back to the board in a future meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? And Tracy, anything from the field? No? Okay. Well, we've now finished the formal part of our agenda, and we come to the juncture where we are open and available for public comments, remembering that would be a 3-minute period per person. And I would ask Tracy, not Casey, Tracy, if anyone else is in the queue for that.
Dominique Nong wants to go back and talk about information item number 5, the debrief of the hearings on the jail inspections.
Okay, Dominique.
Hi, am I unmuted?
There you are.
Perfect.
We can hear you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, as Tracy said, briefly comment on the debrief of the hearings. Based on discussion with partners and on past experience, I just wanted to highlight that the lack of presence of community members at the listening sessions does not necessarily reflect the lack of interest in the issues. It is safe to assume that the level of interest in these adult regulations process is greater to or even more extensive than the participation that we had during the juvenile title regulations process. So some recommendations in the future for the BACC staff to consider for soliciting feedback is to, 1, give more advanced notice of the public hearings, 2, have a stronger collaboration directly with CBOs who are in the locations selected. The CBOs, community-based organizations themselves, can help with providing more effective and targeted outreach to those directly impacted by the subject matter at those hearings. And they can also help facilitate perhaps locations that are more accessible to community members. Finally, I would just like to flag that for some people, they want to mention that there is a need to hold the sessions for the full time that are allotted for the sessions, because some members, unfortunately, due to either work commitments, childcare, or other things, cannot make it right at that 5:30, 6 o'clock mark, and have been planning to make it before the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Randall Broadhurst on the line of the Gang Awareness and Prevention? Now would be your time.
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Randall.
Okay. Hello. Now I've got to look at what I just emailed. So this was on the COVID discussion. So I don't know if this is a good time to be discussing it. It was just on communication and efforts to meet with the youth, either electronically using Zoom, and finding out the names of the youth who are released, because we work inside and outside the detention facilities, so that we could contact the kids after the release, and at the same time be able to know who's still there as residents, so we can have a letter writing campaign and communicate with the kids that are still inside, things we can't go in person during our regular programming. So there was 3 things there.
Yeah, well, and of course we have your email, but I can briefly respond to a few of your requests.
Yeah.
And that is any young person related personal data, we'd be unable to release that. That's sort of a county by county relationship that you would have to move towards. Your agency would have to work towards on a local basis. So we don't do that sort of thing. And the rest of it, we'll review your email, and I appreciate your comments.
Okay, thank you.
And Renee Menard has something more to say.
Hi, everyone. Hi. This is Renee Menard with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. I would also like to make a brief comment regarding accessibility for these meetings. I really appreciate all the effort that has gone into making this virtual meeting possible. And I can see from the participants that it has been a massive turnout. I would like to point out that there were a few folks who had a hard time getting onto the meeting due to the meeting coming back notifying them that they were at capacity. So I don't know if there was a cap at 100. I know that the technical support recommended going back on, but I just wanted to flag for the board that particularly if we will be needing to do another virtual meeting in the future, that's just a potential issue that can be a barrier for folks to join in if there's a cap on the number, or if there are any issues on that front. And I would also reinforce the fact that attendance points to many factors beyond simply interest of the community in being a part of these discussions. For example, as Dominique Nong mentioned, having buildings that are regularly used to host community gatherings can be really critical to ensuring the accessibility for community members. Governmental and law enforcement offices oftentimes don't provide the greatest access for members of the community. And so in particular, when doing these hearing sessions, I know advocates on the call today and others in the areas that meetings occur would certainly love to partner on ways to make these more accessible and to ensure that advance notice is provided to community members so that they can plan. And I would also just like to point out the fact that many people also don't aren't able to attend the meetings directly at the start time. I recall that there was the challenge in Sacramento at the community hearing that the doors were locked prior to the meeting actually being ended. So some people who showed up late were unable to access the meeting who wanted to participate. I just wanted to reiterate these challenges both in physical and virtual spaces. And again, thank the BSCC staff, particularly those on the technical side, with all the work you're doing to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments from board members? All right, seeing none, I'm happy to hear that for the most part, our technical efforts on having a virtual board meeting have gone well. We're open to any feedback from any board members. I think Renee helped us a little bit. From what I remember, Zoom meetings may have 100-person participants in a particular meeting room, but I'm not certain of that.
Adam, that question. Adam, do you know, I thought it was a higher participant level.
Yes, there should have been a higher participant level, but I'm going to ask Sean to chime in because he increased that because at one point we had over 103 participants, and I'm not sure what happened with Zoom there.
Yeah, so this is Sean. Let me update everybody on what was happening with that capacity limit. We were at 100 and we quickly realized that that was an issue. We increased that capacity to, I believe it's 500 now. So we were over 100 at some point. Adam and Tracy reached out to me earlier in the meeting to let me know that we had hit that capacity and people were reaching out to them. We had already increased that meeting cap by that point. So now we have capacity for several hundred. I apologize for anyone who had issues getting in before we realized that issue and resolved it. After this meeting is concluded, we will be uploading the video to YouTube so you can watch it after the fact. That will take a couple hours for everything to render and upload.
All right, and I think for a first shot over the bow, it went rather well, except Scott Budnick should be sanctioned for having a picture of me on his background. So we'll have to figure out how to get him for that. Other than that, I appreciate all the board's time and efforts. Please report to us any issues that you have as a result of our technical efforts. We're expecting to have, of course, an interim meeting between now and our next actually scheduled meeting. We're scheduled for June 11th in San Diego, and that was to be a training meeting about jail inspections. I'm not certain that we'll be able to do that, but we're going to maintain the schedule as it stands now and fit a meeting in between to look hard at the federal money coming our way. Anything from you, Katie?
Nothing further, Madam Chair. Thanks to everybody for being here.
Great work, staff, on the technology here. It was really a great meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.